College of Business appreciates your attendance for this special lecture series. I consider my ability to arouse enthusiasm among people the greatest asset I possess. Focus on your strengths and what you enjoy. A man can succeed at almost anything for which he has unlimited enthusiasm. These are all quotes from Mr. Charles Schwab. They give a great introduction for what we are about to hear today because, as students, we need to know how to succeed. As educators, we need to know how to be enthusiastic. As a community, we need to know what our strengths are, and as future graduates, we need to know our assets. It is now my honor to introduce to you Mr. William LaForge, President of Delta State University.
Thank you and good morning. Welcome to Delta State, especially to our visitors and guests from off campus. This program today is one of those wonderful examples of bringing quality programs and special people to the Delta. And so we're thrilled that you're here to join us for this program this morning. It is Delta State's pleasure to welcome back to our campus Walt and Terry Bettinger. Walt played golf here. You'll hear more about him in a little while in the late 1970s, and it's wonderful to have that favorite son come back to the university. It's going to be an outstanding day. Very pleased that you're on campus, and we look forward to a wonderful program. Thanks for being with us.
I'd like to welcome you to campus from the College of Business. I'm a replacement for the man that was supposed to be here today. Unfortunately, last Friday he fell ill and is now in Jackson recovering from surgery. Dean Moore started the lecture series, and it has been a wonderful addition to the College of Business. Our mission in the College of Business is to provide our students, our profession, the university, and the community with the latest innovations in business. Nurturing cooperative relationships with businesses and industry helps all of us to remain dynamic and relevant in our role. Our vision for our students is to provide them with the skill sets needed for the marketplace. This encompasses providing a variety of educational opportunities. Our lecture series over the years have served to do just that. They provide opportunities to bring distinguished speakers and experts in corporate leadership to our campus. Dialogues of significant business topics attract and educate the community and our student body. By inviting outstanding individuals in all areas of business, we help create a solid base of enrichment for our students. It also spans the divide between the participating professional groups in our community and different areas of the country. We look forward to hearing the thoughts of Mr. Bettinger today as he brings us his expertise in the discussion of topics of interest in the world of investing. Now I would like to introduce Anna Mamadova from the Dean's Student Advisory Council, who will introduce our distinguished visitors.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really honored to present you today Mike Sturdeman, our moderator. Born in Lambert, Mississippi, he is a 1972 Millsaps College graduate. He earned his MBA from Harvard Business School before returning home to partner in the family farming business in 1974. While helping to grow his family farming business, he has served in many leadership positions with organizations and businesses such as the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, National Cotton Council, Staple Cotton, Chickasaw Council of Boy Scouts, Delta Council, Cotton Board, Pillow Academy Endowment Foundation, the First Presbyterian Church of Greenwood, and the Mississippi Methodist Hospital and Rehabilitation Center in Jackson. Mike is married to the former John Carruthers, who is a 1976 graduate of Delta State University with an art education major. They're both actively involved in supporting Delta State as patrons of the Bologna Performing Arts Center and donors to the annual fund. Currently, they both reside in Eta Bena. Let's greet him. Our keynote speaker is Walt Bettinger. Walt Bettinger has been president and CEO of Charles Schwab Corporation since October 2008. It's one of the world's largest financial services firms, with $2.46 trillion in clients' assets. He leads a workforce of nearly 15,000 employees in more than 325 offices across the United States, plus London, Hong Kong, and Puerto Rico. He has also been honored with recognition in Fortune, Smart Money, and Plan Sponsor magazines. He was selected to the Power 30 of the world's most influential and powerful players in 2010. In 2012, he received the 2012 TV1 CEO Summit Award, an award that recognizes CEOs for the attributes of focusing on clients' assets, initiative, and taking responsibility. Fortune magazine named him as one of the top 20 business people of the year 2014. A native of Ada, Ohio, he initially attended Delta State University on the Golf and Academic Scholarship. He graduated with a Bachelor of Business Administration degree with a major in finance from Ohio University. He completed the General Management program offered by Harvard Business School. In addition to his professional duties, he's active in numerous charitable efforts. He and his wife, Terry, are both the founders of Walt and Terry Foundation and are the parents of 5 children. Let's greet him.
Good morning, and glad you're all here. It's indeed an honor and a pleasure for me to be here with Walt. A few ground rules. It's a little hard for me to see, but every once in a while I'll look up, and if there is a question from the audience, we'd love to have that. What I plan to do, it shows on the program that there's a 10:50, there will be a break. I think some of the students may be leaving, going to class, and some others coming in. We don't really plan to take a break right now. Our plan is, even during that time, we really might receive questions from the audience and kind of keep the flow going so that we don't lose the continuity of what we start in the beginning and ending at 11:30. So with that, if there is a question that before that time that you'd like to ask, like I said, I'll try and do this every once in a while. If somebody has a question, I'll try and recognize you, and we'll go from there. But let's start off. Walt, tell us a little bit about yourself, other than your bio and your upbringing, your family, life today.
Well, thank you, Mike. Before I do, if I could just thank all of you for the opportunity to be here, for this invitation. It's incredibly special. Memories pouring back from almost 35 years ago. But the honor is Terry and mine to be with all of you, and thank you so much. So I grew up in a small farming town in northwest Ohio. It was interesting, when I came and visited Cleveland, Mississippi, this was a big city for me. We didn't have a McDonald's where I grew up. We had one stoplight, but I was very, very blessed to grow up in a wonderful, loving family. 4 kids. I was the youngest of 4. My dad was a professor, actually at a university. My mom stayed home, and it was sort of one of those idyllic type of upbringings in a very small town in the Midwest.
Well, how'd you end up coming to Delta State, being from that rural area in Ohio?
You know, it's an interesting story. I played all sports in high school, and late in my high school tenure had a little bit of success at golf. Although I have to clarify that it was Ohio's success at golf. Turned out not to be quite the same as Mississippi's success at golf. But I was contacted by dear Dr. Darrell Foreman, who was the coach here, and had an opportunity to visit. I actually drove down in my 1968 Ford between Christmas and New Year's of 1978. Of course, this is all pre-internet, pre-Weather Channel, of course. There were no encyclopedias with the weather in Cleveland, Mississippi. I knew that I wanted to go somewhere warmer, have a chance to play golf, and every day I was here, 3 or 4 days, it was 75, 80, and sunny, and I thought I had died and gone to heaven. But in all sincerity, it felt like home. You know, the Northwest Ohio is very flat, much like the Delta. The people that I met were incredibly warm, welcoming, even though I talked different, and just made me feel comfortable. And so I was just thrilled to have the opportunity to come to Delta State.
Well, once you got to Delta State, what was the decision that you decided to leave Delta State? Now that's got to be.
So I mentioned earlier I had some success at Ohio golf, which wasn't quite the same as Mississippi golf. I realized early on during my time here that whatever game I was playing was very different than the game that other members of the team were playing. Some are even here today, as well as those we played against. But it was a wonderful experience. But I realized after a couple of years that I was probably a bit out of my league from a golf standpoint. I remember I went to see Dr. Foreman. Probably still looking back at it, one of the times that I was most nervous in my life to tell him that I thought it would be best for me to transfer and walk away from the scholarship that he'd been so kind to offer me. And he said something to me that to this day is probably one of the most humbling and kind things that anyone's ever said to me. He goes, "Walt, when I recruited you, I thought you might end up being a golfer who could contribute for us a little bit, but I mainly recruited you because of the type of young person you were, and I wanted that to represent Delta State." And thank you. It was an honor when he said that. And of course, when he said that, everything I thought to myself was, "Gosh, what a bad decision I'm just making bad decision making to leave." But he was a gentleman at that time, as he was at all times, and as he had an ability to do, made everyone feel better about themselves at each moment, no matter what success they were enjoying or what failures they were facing. And I've always been grateful for that conversation and those kind words.
Well, I know Delta State hated losing you those last 2 years, but we're extremely happy that you're back here today.
Thank you.
I read that you had an experience at Ohio University that had an enormous impact. Do you mind sharing that with us? Because I know you did well at Ohio University.
Thank you. I did. It was really. I wouldn't even just call it a business career shaping experience. I think it was a life shaping experience. So when I transferred, as I mentioned, my dad was a professor and Mom stayed home, so we would scrape together nickels, and after not having a scholarship for transfer to Ohio University, it was particularly challenging. So what I did is I doubled up to do 2 years in one because it was cheaper that way. I only had room and board for 1 year. So I had between 28 and 36 quarter hours for all 3 quarters. And what I remember is in my spring quarter, the last quarter, I was in a night class. And I'd had some success at Ohio University. I'd done quite well academically. I had a 4-point grade point average through that period. And I was driven to finish that out and end up with that 4-point. I was in this night class. We met twice a week in the evenings for 2.5, 3 hours in the business school building, and we would take a break or two, of course, each class. And we got to the final exam, and I had put in a huge amount of time studying, memorizing formulas. This is one of those classes where you did case studies, I'm sure all of you are familiar with. And I'd learned all my formulas and memorized and was all prepared for this last exam of my college career to sort of close things out and then go on and, in my mind at that time, set the world on fire, despite how naive I was about that. And the professor handed out the exam. It was on one piece of paper, and I just remember being shocked. How can the whole exam be on one piece of paper? He said, "Now wait till I pin it all out before you turn it over." And once he got done, he said, "Okay, go ahead and turn it over." And the other side was blank too. And now I was really baffled. And the professor said to us, "In the last 10 weeks, I've taught you everything that I can teach you about business, but the single most important thing. And he said, what's the name of the lady who cleans the building? And you know, I still, in many ways, I still get a little bit emotional just thinking about that. But I thought that business was all about what I knew, and business was about expertise and intellect and all these various things. And what he reminded us was about people. I failed that exam. It's the only exam I ever failed. I lost my 4-point because I ended up with a B in the class. I didn't know Dottie's name that evening, but I've tried to know every Dottie ever since.
Fantastic. Well, you started out early as an entrepreneur launching your own company at 22. What were you thinking, and how did that turn out?
That's a good question, Mike. What was I thinking at 22? You know, it's interesting, because I'd finished school a year early, I had an opportunity to work in the pension department of a large insurance company, and training as an actuary, and I had some reasonable success in that role. And so I thought, well, this doesn't seem that hard. I should better go out and do this on my own. But I don't think I realized that, you know, at 22, and I looked like I was 17, and I shaved once a week whether I needed to or not, I might have a bit of a credibility challenge calling on big companies. But I recall I spent my life savings at the time, which was probably a couple $1,000s. I hand typed. I had some brochures printed up. Hand typed out about 1,000 envelopes. Of course, we didn't have word processors or any of those things, probably an IBM selector. Mailed them all out and then waited for the phone to ring. And I waited for the phone to ring, and I waited for the phone to ring, and after a couple of weeks I realized that the phone was not going to ring. So then I started cold calling, and by that point I had a nice 1976 Ford Maverick. Remember the Ford Maverick? Now, I didn't have the sporty 2-door. I had the 4-door version of the Ford Maverick. But I got in my car, and I think I drove around and visited every industrial park in the Midwest, cold calling on companies. And they all look the same. They've got like a 10-by-10 office with a white tile floor, and there was a sliding glass window with someone sitting on the other side slamming it in my face. But it was humbling, Mike. You know, I went a year, cold called every day, all day long, and at the end of the year, I had no clients. So I learned an awful lot in those early years about failure. And of course, we learn so much more from failure than we ever do from any kind of success.
Well, going from that and being the founder, an entrepreneur, founder of a company, how did that prepare you to be the CEO of Charles Schwab, $40 billion market capitalization company?
Well, I was fortunate. I think eventually somebody took pity on me and hired me to help them with their retirement plan. But you know, eventually that company grew and became quite large. Actually, we became Charles Schwab's largest client, and then by '95 sold the company to Schwab. There were a lot of consistencies between the way that I had tried to lead my firm, which I called the Hampton Company. I didn't want to put my name in it because, again, at 22, if they'd have thought I owned the company, I'd have probably been in trouble. But there were a lot of similarities. A focus on the client, really simple, straightforward things like the golden rule. But one of the things that really stands out to me, Mike, maybe as much as anything, is about 2 or 3 years into my time at Schwab, when I sold the firm, I signed a 5-year employment contract. I fully expected to leave at 40 or retire at 40 or do something completely different. I sold the firm when I was 35. And I had gone through a divorce and had 3 older children. And they spent an enormous amount of time with me in raising them. And I remember when my middle 2 got to the age that they were ready to start first grade, I really felt that as a single parent, I needed to be there, put them on the school bus in the morning, be there at 2:35 when they got off the school bus in the afternoon. And so I called my boss, it was John Coughlin at the time. John actually went on to become the CEO of Visa. And I said, John, I think I'm going to have to buy my way out of this employment contract. I really need to be there for my children. and that's got to be the priority. That's what matters to me more than anything else. And John said, well, don't quit, you don't have to quit. Let me get back to you. He called me back in an hour or two. I was still in Ohio. Of course, John was in San Francisco. And he said, I talked with Chuck. That became an ad campaign 20 years later. But anyway, he said, I talked to Chuck, and just do what you need to do. Be a father first. Put the kids on the school bus, leave the office early. I was running the division, which had been the company I'd sold at that time, about 1,000 people. And he said, leave early. We know you, Walt. After you make lunches, put the kids to bed at night. You're going to be back working. And the message that it sent, which I thought was so consistent with what we tried to be at Hampton and what we still try to be today at Schwab, is if you treat people as a person first and a business person second, the loyalty that you engender is extraordinary. And I think that cultural consistency really made that transition fairly straightforward. It's not about intellect, and it's not about expertise. It's about people, as business is all about people, going all the way back to Dottie.
Well, I think it goes back to your character and the foundation you had where you grew and being at Delta State. But let's go on and talk a little bit about your path at Charles Schwab. How your career progressed, and once you joined the company, and was there a particular turning point in there that put you onto the path of being CEO?
I've been very fortunate and very blessed in the path, and much of what I've been fortunate with is people who would be really direct and honest with me about all the things that I was lousy at. That's a real blessing to have those people who care about you enough to tell you the areas that you really need to grow and improve in. And this John Coven, who I referenced earlier, about a year into my time at Schwab, he flew out to Ohio to deliver my performance review. And now I hadn't had a performance review in 13 or 14 years, right, since I'd started my own firm that long ago. And he came out and he made a reservation at a nice restaurant, and I thought, well, this is going to go well. He's going to tell me all about the great things I'm doing and make me feel good about myself. And John sat down, and he had an extraordinary way about him. And he said through a smile to me, you know, Walt, when you were at Hampton, you might have been the best salesperson, or you might have been the best marketing person, or the best actuary, or doing the books. But now that you're at Schwab, you're not the best at any of those things. Now, you might be competent at many of them, but you're not the best at any of them. So you're going to need to figure out between now and your next performance review how to let go and let other people who are better than you do the things that they're better at, or our next performance review, I'm going to have to let you go. And it was just, again, one of those moments in your life that really hits you, that this person cares enough to tell me what I needed to hear, and deliver it in a way that helped me see as clearly as he could see where I was falling short. And I think that in many ways was just a huge opportunity for me to see and learn and recognize what the real role in the business is. It's about serving other people from a leadership standpoint, not about being served.
Well, now, you were named CEO in 2008, and you were following behind a guy whose name's on the door, and what a transition in someone you're having to follow. Tell us about that transition, and then I'd like for you to talk a little bit, especially for the students that are here, or for anybody else, how you enter a culture as a CEO, the culture that may have been there, and how you transition the style that you think ought to be there, and if there were any major changes you had to make. And all of a sudden, now you're a little bit different in playing in corporate politics. Not everybody that's been an entrepreneur may not want to enter into that realm.
It was such an interesting time. I mean, for many of us, we can remember the fall of 2008, right? I mean, it seemed like the world was coming to an end. Every day I was ready to call Terry and say, run down to the bank and get out as much cash as you can, because I don't know if it's going to be open tomorrow. It was really an extraordinary time. But I think what made it easier is the way Chuck took me under his wing and managed that succession. So a few years before, when Chuck talked with me about eventually moving into the CEO role, he said, we're going to set up a plan. And I'm going to include you in every important meeting where we have to review things, discuss things. And when it's over, we're going to have a conversation, just you and I, one-on-one. And then if a decision has to be made at that level, he's going to make it. And then he said, over time, we're going to have that conversation and we're going to jointly make those decisions. And then that last 6 months or a year before you take over as CEO, we'll still talk about it, but you're going to make that decision. And I'm going to back you, whatever you decide. And so he allowed me that opportunity to sort of ease into the role and ease into the environment. Now let me say, going back to what a difficult time that was, I mean, it was really extraordinary. I mean, we like to talk about it, those of us who lived through it, as the financial crisis. But I'd actually like to refer to it more as a leadership crisis. Our country and so many of the people across our country that were hurt from that time, they weren't hurt because of some innocuous financial thing that went wrong. There were people making decisions that weren't maybe the best decisions. And their leadership and their desire to be served and their desire to, as I say, play games with what we like to call OPM, or other people's money, led to that crisis. And I felt very fortunate stepping in for Chuck, who hadn't made those kind of decisions, who had set up the company in a conservative manner such that we were the largest financial services firm that didn't take any money under TARP, under the bailout. And as a result, those first 3 years, we brought in 66% more money than all 4 of our major competitors, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, TD Ameritrade, and E-Trade, had added together because of the conservative decisions that Chuck has made. And I think what I've tried to do is maintain that same philosophy, Mike, that when people entrust their money to us, they want a firm that's going to be there, they want a firm that's going to be conservative, and they want a firm that recognizes it's their money, it's not our money.
Well, as you said, you've recently become the largest financial investment services firm publicly traded in the United States. And as you look at how you go forward after having survived a crisis like that, how do you maintain that success, and what strategy do you have going forward?
One of the first things that I did in 2007 when I became president is I wanted to maintain the continuity of the strategy that's built around sort of the golden rule, doing the right thing by people. But it needed to be simplified. It needed to be put in a way that everyone in our company at that time, say about 17 or 18,000 people, everyone could understand, everyone could repeat. And so we put in place a strategy, very simple, 3 words, through client's eyes. And that remains our strategy today. And the beauty of a strategy as simple as through client's eyes is every person from the first day they come to work at Schwab, or someone that's been there 40 years, knows what it means. It means when we are faced with a decision, we will always make the decision that is the right one through the eyes of the client. And it's a little bit simplistic, and I will admit there are some reporters over the years that have challenged me and maybe even criticized us for having a simple philosophy like that. But maybe this goes back to upbringing, time at Delta State, and Dottie's story and things like that. But I really believe in the goodness of human nature. And if you do the right thing by people, they will choose to do more business with you. You don't have to coerce them. You don't have to bribe them. If you do the right thing, they will simply choose to do more business with you. And that's the philosophy we've applied. And that's how we've gone from 1.1 trillion to 2.5 trillion in the last 6 years or so. And we're just going to maintain that simple, straightforward, do the right thing strategy. And in an industry like ours, where I think the trust factor is, I think we're now 1 step below used cars. I'm not quite sure. But in an industry like ours, that is a differentiating strategy, to simply do the right thing by the client. We're going to stay with that.
Well, it sure will ensure loyalty, I think, if you do the right thing. Well, let's change tack. What do you look for when you're looking to hire executives? I know we've got several students here. What is it they need to be thinking about? What are you looking for?
Well, maybe I can answer that from two different angles, what I'm looking for and what I would encourage them. So everybody that I interview or that I have an opportunity to consider for the type of roles that I would be interviewing for, they're all really smart. They're all extraordinarily capable. They're highly educated. I want to know what's inside here. I want to know what goes on inside their heart more than their brain. And so over the years, I've just tried to come up with a variety of different ways to really know what matters to them. And I want to see how they treat people. I remember often a statement someone made to me that everybody is nice to someone who can do something for them. But the measure of someone's character is how they treat someone that they'll maybe never see again. So I've done little things like this where maybe I'll have a breakfast interview with someone, and I'll get there a few minutes early and pull the manager of the restaurant aside and say, I want you to mess up Marie's order on purpose. It'll be okay, tip will still be all right, but I want to see how Marie reacts when the order isn't right or when something doesn't go well. So little things like that give maybe just a picture into the character of someone. Turning it around, Mike, the other side. I think when you go out and start determining where you would want to work, what's maybe most important is to know yourself. Know your values, know the things that matter to you. And what I always encourage young people to do is, if you're considering going to work for a company, in this day and age of social media and internet and Google, go out and learn everything you can about, say, the CEO of the company that you're considering, because every organization ultimately reflects its leadership, right? And learn as much as you can. See if the values of that person align with yours. See if the things that matter to that person are consistent with yours, because if those two things align, you'll be happy wherever you choose to work. And it won't be an issue of whether you climb the corporate ladder or how much money you make or things like that. Your values will be consistent with that company. And the flip side is if your personal values are inconsistent with that company, again, I don't care how fast you climb the ladder or what you get paid, you will ultimately be unhappy. And to me, that's what's most important. Understanding your values, doing something that you really love, and the rest of the things, however they end up unfolding, you'll be happy either way. And after all, isn't that what's most important?
Thank you for that. Now that you've been CEO for several years, what's your most rewarding role? What really makes you happy?
It's interesting because actually that question in many ways aligns with my time here. I still think of myself as that 22-year-old person that shaved once a week, whether I needed to or not, cold calling on companies. And I get really excited. I get really jazzed about seeing people's dreams fulfilled, whether it's the extraordinary people that I've been so fortunate to work with over the years, or clients who are able to have success and achieve dreams and care for their families, provide for their families. To me, that is far and away the most rewarding thing. And I have to divert, if I could, a little bit, just maybe to talk a little bit about that. In this day and age, we tend, and I don't know whether it's the press or the people that occupy senior roles in corporate America, but we tend to try to put people in prominent roles onto pedestals. So we try to think of them or describe them in some special, magical way. And unfortunately, in that process, there's a whole lot of people in maybe professional roles like I'm in that have come to actually see themselves in these roles as the opportunity for them to be served, to be taken care of, to be backslapped, or whatever it might be. And that's really not leadership. And I can tell you, certainly that's not the kind of person that I've wanted to follow during my career, as I've been fortunate to work with so many great leaders and follow them. You know, real leadership is about recognizing the needs of others and using that position you might be in to serve them and help them achieve and be successful. To me, that is what the role is all about, servant leadership, about being in a position to make a difference in helping others, in serving others, and not being served. That's the reward of my job.
Now, this is a question that's not really, I thought about until you said this. You know, you're trying to help the client. I think so many in this industry, in the financial services industry, are selling products that actually is not the best thing for their client. It's maybe better for the one selling it. And I think you've taken a little bit different tack with Charles Schwab.
You know, it's such an interesting point, Mike. So most financial services firms' business model is based on the more we can get the consumer to do things that are bad for them, the better it is for our profitability. I mean, what a broken concept, right? What a broken model. So, you know, if you've got, if this is a bank and they've got credit cards, what do they want you to do, right? I mean, they want you to go out, spend more than you can afford to pay off that month, so you turn around and pay 21% interest or something like that on your credit card. Or if you run a bank, you know, they want you to go down to the, you know, at the Starbucks and swipe your debit card when you didn't have enough in the account to pay for that coffee, and so you get hit with a $20, you know, overdraft. Or go to the ATM to get out $20 and hit you with a, you know, a $2 or $3 fee because you're not at the ATM of that bank. I mean, what a broken concept and a broken model. And when I had the opportunity in the middle of the last decade to move into the core part of Schwab, out of the retirement part that I had been running, we had a lot of those problems. We had a significant number of those problems at Schwab because we had fallen into that same trap. The internet bubble had burst a couple years before. We were still a firm that generated a lot of its revenue from clients buying or selling stocks on their own decisions, but that was still a big part of the revenue stream. And I think what had happened is along the way, a bunch of really, really smart people had done a whole series of PowerPoint presentations that if we just do this one little nickel and dime thing, clients won't really care. They'll be okay with it, and look what it can create revenue for us. You know, and then someone did another one, and another one, and another one, and all of a sudden you look up, and in many ways, we looked like everybody else. And when I stepped into that role, there were a couple of things I wanted to do right away. I asked for the name of the last 50 of our employees who had quit, who talked to clients every day, client-facing employees. And I asked for the last 50 clients who had moved their money away from Charles Schwab. And I started calling them. And it wasn't long, it was probably not 3 or 4 calls before what they told me all started to sound the same. We had become like everybody else. I remember sitting down with Chuck saying, we can be like everybody else and we'll have a nice company with, you know, whatever, $500 billion or whatever we had in client assets at that time, or we can really be something different. And gave him a proposal that said, we're going to wipe out every nuisance fee, every one of these charges, all these things will go away. You know, people can go to any ATM and anywhere in the entire world and get whatever they want out, and then there'll be never a fee. You know, if the bank charges a fee, we'll reimburse a whole series of things. And I was a little bit terrified to propose something like that, because when you go to your boss and say, what we need to do is eliminate 25% of our revenue, and I can't do anything to tell you what we'll get in return, other than I believe that clients will say, that's the kind of company I want to do business with. Now that might have been like when I was 22 and naive. I didn't know better. But Chuck said, let's go do that. Let's do it. And with his support and the support of the board, we undertook a 2 or 3 year period in which we eliminated every one of those kind of fees. The firm exploded in growth, and of course it hasn't changed since.
I gotta ask, you said Chuck, in the board group, how much arm twisting was there in that board meeting to be able to get the board to go along that, or does Chuck really have that much, or what he says goes? I'm curious about that, seriously.
Well, I wasn't privy to the arm twisting that I'm guessing went on outside that room, but I'm sure there was a fair amount. But you know, our board, long-term responsibility to shareholders. We don't manage a company for quarterly earnings. They saw the same thing once presented clearly to them that we were becoming and had become. And to their credit, they quickly agreed, this is the right thing to do. This is who we are. I mean, go back to when Chuck started the firm over 40 years ago. So for us, you know, old folks, we remember this kind of thing. But prior to 1975, if you wanted to buy a stock or sell a stock, it was regulated. I mean, all commissions were the same. Didn't matter where you went, whether you went to Merrill Lynch or Charles Schwab or wherever you happened to go. Commissions were the same. And then commissions were deregulated. And what virtually all firms did is they lowered commissions for their big institutions, and they raised them on the small retail investor. And Chuck did the opposite. He said, I'm not going to serve big institutions. I'm going to only serve Main Street. And he slashed commissions 70% below everybody else. He was a challenger, what I call a challenger at that point in time when he started the firm. And all we did 10 or 12 years ago, excuse me, is we went back to being that same challenger. We're going to do the opposite of what everybody else is doing with a trust in human nature and the fact that they'll reward us with their business.
Thank you for doing that. Now let me ask you a little bit tougher question, maybe a little ticklish. Was there somebody had a question? Oh, the SEC has now proposed a rule that public companies must disclose CEO pay as a ratio of the median pay of all employees. You know, I went and looked at the internet this morning. I can pull up what your compensation is, and you make, you know, over $10 million in 1 year. How would you justify that to a report that said one person getting that much money? How would you justify that in your role?
You know, it's a great question, and it's a fair question. It's an important question. I don't think anybody, certainly not me, can justify being paid, you know, well over $10 million a year to do any job. I don't think any professional athlete can justify being paid $25 million, or an actor $50 million, or a hedge fund manager $250 million. I don't think anybody can justify that. Now, there's probably some market forces in play there. You know, I can say personally, in almost 35 years in business, I've never asked for a raise. I've never asked for a certain level of compensation. Never negotiated anything. I don't have a contract. I'm probably one of the few CEOs of companies our size that don't have a contract. I don't want a contract. If I do a good job, they should. You know, they may want to keep me, and if I do a bad job, they should be able to get rid of me. I think what goes along, though, with that level of compensation is responsibility. Enormous responsibility. Enormous responsibility to others. Responsibility to recognize how fortunate my family and I are, and to ensure that to a maximum extent we share in that with others. And then I think what's also really important is that you keep in mind, that I keep in mind, that the number of zeros on a person's paycheck has nothing to do with their importance. Who we are as people, how we live our lives, is far more important than the number of zeros on a paycheck.
I would like to point out that I think his salary that he actually receives is very modest compared to what most of those that corporations this size make. Most of his pay is either in stock options, incentives, and things like that above and beyond. So I pose that question, and I think what you make is really very fair. But a question I think we would all like to hear how CEOs would answer that question. We have aspiring leaders, especially those that in this room, those that are in college. Talk a little bit more about what you think it takes to be a successful leader, in whatever role, whether it be an entrepreneur or in corporate America.
Sure. You know, from a corporate standpoint, let me draw a distinction between management and leadership, if I could. So, so management is contractual. We all have bosses, right? Every one of us has a boss. My boss is board of directors, but of course you all have a boss, and to a certain extent that's a contractual relationship, right? I mean, within a range, there are things that I need to do or I won't have my job. The unique thing about a managerial relationship is that I can show up for work every day and do enough that my manager feels good about the work I'm doing. I never have to really tell him how I feel and how I feel about that person. Leadership is so different. Leadership is not something that's contractual, but leadership is a decision that we make every day, again, in here, in our heart. Are we going to make a voluntary decision to follow someone? I mean, I can tell you that during my career, the few times that I was unfortunate enough to work for someone who I didn't really admire as a leader and I really wanted to follow, I probably didn't do very good work. And the times that I worked for someone who I really believed in and I knew cared about what was best for me and my family and doing the right thing, I'm sure I did my best work. So I think when you think about the future, or you think about things that you may, as students, may want to do, or paths that you may want to pursue, just bear in mind that if you find your way toward a position that has more authority, focus on being a great leader as opposed to a great manager. Managers are easy to find. Leaders are special. Leaders are something different. You know, I think from an entrepreneurial standpoint, in many ways, to be an entrepreneur requires a certain amount of, I'd say, relationship skills, sales skills, but ultimately it also comes back to relationships with people. Because even if you're an entrepreneur, you have a bunch of bosses, right? Your bosses are all of your clients, all your customers. We all do. And even then, I would say, it's not enough. This is sort of the manager-leader comparison at the entrepreneurial level. It's not enough just to be good at what you do or to provide good service to your clients or a fair value. Relationships matter there too. And it may be a slightly different relationship, but the relationship where that client, that customer knows you really care about them, and it's more than just the dollars and cents involved in the relationship, I think that is a path to success just as much from an entrepreneur as it is in a corporate world.
Well, who would you say has had the biggest influence on your own approach to business and leadership?
Well, I can tell you a couple of people that are here because they were on the Delta State golf team, and after playing 18 holes with them, I started sitting in the front row in class. Whatever ideas I had about making a living playing golf quickly went out the window after playing 18 holes with folks like Tommy Crosby and Robert Pannell and people like that. So they had a big influence. But you know, I think in all seriousness, two people stand out. You know, one is Chuck. Chuck Schwab, a consummate entrepreneur, a person who has spent his entire life trying to find the right thing to do, to be disruptive, to be a challenger on the side of the consumer, and educate me. I'll share a really quick story about Chuck, and then I'll mention the second, my father. But early on, I think it was before I'd actually become CEO, but I might have been president, we were faced with this incredibly complicated business issue. And we did the classic sort of MBA type thing. We did a big PowerPoint analysis. We had a series of if-then. We had wargaming in it. You know, we're going to do this. Competition will do that. This will be our counter. It was all beautifully done, probably 80 pages on a PowerPoint. I sat down for a one-on-one meeting with Chuck, and you know, Chuck is an extreme gentleman, and I started in
on page 1, and I don't know, I got to maybe page 2, and I could just see, as much of a gentleman as he just couldn't take it anymore. And he said to me, Walt, you know, stop. He said, I'm sure this is amazingly great work, and you've analyzed choices A, B, and C. But let me just ask you a question. Through the lens of the client, through the eyes of the client, which one of these decisions is the one that they would want us to make, purely based on our interests? And I said, oh, well, you know, that's easy, Chuck. That would be A in the analysis. He said, well, we don't need to do it anymore. Just go do A. And that just simple but yet powerful way of sort of cutting through all the clutter and would have saved a lot of time on that PowerPoint analysis, I can tell you that. But that beautiful way to just cut through the clutter and simplify things is incredibly powerful. And of course, I still try to rely on that today. And then, you know, also I mentioned my late father. One of the things that he was fond of saying to me, and again, this is, you know, I don't think my dad ever made more than $21,000 a year, put four kids through college, but he was fond of just saying to me that virtually everything in the world can be bought and sold except for a reputation. He said, once you lose that reputation, you never get it back. You can't buy it, you can't sell it, and just never forget that in everything you do and everything you say. And that has stayed with me for my entire life. As I mentioned, I lost him a couple of years ago. Hugely impactful.
Good advice for all of us. I said at 10:50, it's a little past that. Are there any questions from the audience that someone might have they'd like to ask of Walt? Look, we've got a great crowd here. Let's.
We do have a microphone.
Mr. Barron, this microphone is on. You got a question up there?
You hear about Wall Street versus Main Street and the left coast versus the right coast versus middle America. It seems like all of the wealth and influence between Wall Street and hedge funds. You got the internet on the left coast, kind of in your area. What can we do in middle America to have more influence and wealth? Because it just seems like it's kind of New York and Washington and kind of the San Francisco area where all the influential decision makers are.
So I think we got to go there and take them over, right? That sounds like the answer to me.
I think Walt's doing a good job.
Yeah, I wish I had some great insight there. I don't know that I do, but I'll share this. It is extraordinary the number of business leaders that I meet who grew up in the Midwest, in the South, you know, in Kansas, in Colorado, in what the folks who are the coasters like to call, what do they like to call us? The flyover areas, right? The flyover. It's different. It is different. You know, I've spent most of my life in Ohio, a couple of years here, and you know, now live on the West Coast. It is different. And there's a lot of great people there too, who care about doing the right thing. But I think the issue really just comes down to each one of us individually. You know, where do our priorities lie? What type of influence might we want to have? And then be willing to go out and take risks. And to the extent we want to have influence, put ourselves in the positions where we might be able to.
Thank you.
Would you talk us through the process you used when you went through reflection, evaluation, and professional development after your supervisor said you've got a year, you're good at these things, but what are you going to be the best at?
You know, it was an interesting time because I was going through more than just that. I'd also, in addition to that, which I'd shared, you know, I had been a workaholic. I didn't go through a lot of details about when I started Hampton, but what had actually happened is I finally realized that that cold calling wasn't going to work because I didn't have any credibility. And so what I did is I stopped cold calling and I started studying for all my actuarial exams. And I studied, this will sound silly, but it is absolutely what happened. I studied from 6 in the morning until 11 o'clock at night, nonstop, and over a 12-month period, passed all these exams, got all these letters again, my name I don't use anymore. And then I cold called on accounting firms and law firms and said, I'll come in and do your continuing education for free for your professionals, save you money having to send them, in this case, down to Columbus, Ohio to do this, hotel travel out of the office. And with the hope that if these professionals realize I know what I'm talking about, they'll refer me to their clients where they have credibility, of course. But that's just one example. The hours that I worked in those early years were extraordinary, and certainly was a contributing factor to the loss of my first marriage, because I was such a workaholic. And I think the combination of that, as well as the conversation with John Coughlin, really made me stop and ask, what is success? And what do I want to be known as? What do I want when someone says Walt Bettinger many years from now, what do I want them to think of? And I think really facing certain circumstances like that can't help but put us in a position to be reflective, look in the mirror, and then I had the benefit of people who helped me do that also. And ultimately what you do is I think you come out and you say, what matters to me, and what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses, and then you got to make decisions to live it and accept the consequences. I'll share one other quick example around it. So when the board of directors at Schwab first spoke with me about becoming CEO someday, this was I think 2005, and I said, I'm humbled by the fact that you would consider me for that, but I've got my middle two children, and they don't graduate high school till 2011. And I'm not going to put them in a position of asking them whether they're going to move with me to California and stay with me and not see their mom. I'm not going to ask them that. And so if you want me to be CEO, I'd be honored to try, but I can't relocate from Ohio to California till summer of 2011. And if that means that you go find somebody else, well, so be it, right? Because at that point, I understood what my priorities were, what mattered to me. And whatever the consequences of that were, so be it. And I think that type of thing as much as anything else, and I'm grateful that the board said, absolutely, Walt, we want you, and we'll let you go back and forth and stay there till 11. But I think knowing who you are and what matters to you is probably most important in terms of making that sort of understanding and that adjustment.
Any other questions?
Right here. That black. So you talked about hiring people and looking at trying to see what's in their hearts. And as college students, we always look at trying to perfect our resumes, and we always hear about resumes. But how do you encourage your leadership team that are on the face-to-face basis of hiring college students to look at their resumes, and what are they looking at when they're looking at their resumes to find those people that have good hearts, if you want to put it that way? And what would you encourage us as college students to participate in to be in such a great company as yours?
So I don't think there's any magical answer to that. You need to spend time with someone. You have to ask them questions that clearly put them in a position of discomfort. So I'm grateful you asked the question about pay. You gotta put people in a position where you can really understand who they authentically are. Because we're all taught and trained, right, to put on an air, to put on a show, to put on a presentation, to share just enough of what's comfortable and maybe make someone think that we got it all together. when the reality is all of us are a mixture of strengths and weaknesses, challenges. Some part of us is together, some part of us isn't. That's who we all are. And so I think you try to create an environment where a person opens up about their real authentic self. And resumes are beautiful, and they open the door, right? And I don't want to discount the importance of them. But I've fired many people that went to the most premier business schools in the United States and put people into the jobs that didn't, who ended up far better. Now, I'm not saying that I also have people that went to the top business schools in the country who've done incredibly well. But it's not where they went to school, it's what's in here. And I think that's what you try to do. And it begins by being authentic and vulnerable yourself, right? I mean, relationships are based on trust. Trust forms from authenticity. Trust forms from vulnerability. Trust comes from me, being willing to share with you not only some things that I've been fortunate about that have been successful, but with a lot of things in my life that have been failures. And I think you try to do that as you try to evaluate someone and whether they'd be a good fit for the organization. And then what you ask the other person to do the same thing on their side.
I'd like to add and get Walt's feedback. I think if you do your homework like Walt has said, and you send the resume, don't leave it at that. If you're really interested in the company, you make the effort on your point to get in and make the interview personal interview rather than one that's just on written paper. From there, whether you have a chance or not depends on how you handle that, but you've got to go the extra mile.
Could not agree more. As I mentioned, in this day and age, I mean, you can Google and find 10,000 things written, said, whatever, about any exec, any CEO, and I'd want to work for a company who had a CEO that I'd feel good about following.
I think that's true not only if you want to go on to a grad school, the same process, you get a lot of students that will apply. The ones that they pick, there's got to be a hook, but it depends on you and how you handle that and getting into where they can see you, talk to you personally.
Couldn't agree more, Mike. Exactly right.
We have a question. We have a question.
Hello, I'm Melvin Tucker. I'm in the aviation program, studying to be a pilot. As you were saying, being very passionate, I'm very passionate about learning to fly. But I was wondering if you can elaborate a little bit more on when like your emotions have you down, or like you still have to be that leader. So I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on when things aren't going well for you personally, how do you still push through and fulfill your role as CEO?
Thanks, it's a great question. I can tell you, the absolute best thing I can count on is this wonderful woman that sits in front of me. I outkicked my coverage when Terry agreed to marry me, to use a football term, and since Delta State's going to win tomorrow at the football game, right? But again, I think it just comes down to the people that you surround yourself with. Attitude is so much. I mentioned earlier about people over the many years that I've had to either ask to step off the train or invite on the train. Attitude is just a differentiator. It is absolutely a differentiator. People that have a positive attitude, we all have challenges, right? I mean, we all face things that frustrate us. I can tell you the Federal Reserve frustrates the heck out of me. Their zero interest rate policies reduce our revenue almost 80%. We go up about 80%, so I guess we're reduced more like almost by half, by about 40%, if they would simply get off the zero. So yeah, you all have frustrations. We all have them. But attitude is everything, right? We make a decision every day when we wake up and we go get in that car or whatever, turn that key. We make a decision on whether we're going to be someone that when other people see us and spend time with us, they're going to feel better about themselves or they're going to feel worse about themselves. And I constantly encourage all of our people, attitude. One of the things we do in our company, I think that is fairly unique and interesting. We're really big on the concept of employee engagement. And many of you may have studied that. You may even study it here at Delta State Business School. Employee engagement is way beyond the issue of, are you happy at your job or something like that. Engagement is a completely different measure. And what's fascinating is we know when one of our clients talks to an employee who is fully engaged versus talks to one of our employees who is actively disengaged. By the way, we try to find every one of them and ask them off the train if they're not able to change that. There is a 6 times greater likelihood that that client will choose to do more business with us. So this is not just some, happy garbage that I'm, throw out around attitude. It makes business sense. It drives revenue, it drives profit, it drives happy clients, it drives results. But it's about attitude.
Just carry that a little bit further, employee engagement. How, in such a large company, how does that filter ideas and strategy going forward, trying to come up with new products as you go forward, as large as you are? How often do you have it bottom driven rather than from top down?
So I'll share a couple stories and philosophies around that because I think it's such an important issue. So when I became the head of the retail side of Schwab, this is 10 or 12 years ago, which is about 2/3 of the company. It's the part that most of you are probably familiar with, the retail side of the firm. I called a meeting of, I'd been parachuted into this role. I called a meeting of the senior execs of that group. There were, 12 or 50 people around the room. 6 of them had president titles. They all had chiefs of staff sitting, one behind them and all this kind of thing. And I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. First thing is, I want each of you to go around the room and I want you to tell me the details of your last interaction with a client, but it needs to be sometime within the last 90 days. Well, all but about 2 of those people were not part of Charles Schwab around a week after that, because if you're not talking to clients, if you're not engaged with the clients that we're trying to serve, how can you make decisions? How can you be in a position of trust? How can you ask someone making $60,000 in a service center on the phone in Indianapolis to care about clients and engage with them when you're sitting in some executive suite in San Francisco and you don't talk to clients? So I think it begins by understanding clients, and then the other thing that is critical that we did is we changed to where 50% of all of our senior executive meetings are held in the field, in our locations, whether it's Orlando or Cleveland or Indianapolis or Denver or Phoenix or Austin, Chicago. We go in the field with our people, with the employees, and meet with them and have our senior executive meetings there. We invite them into the room with us to be part of it. And then I think you got to have personal accountability. A big part of my job is traveling around the country and surprising them. Was it Christmas Eve or thereabouts? We stopped at a mall in Indianapolis and grabbed 5 dozen cookies, and I went into the service center with the cookies in my blue jeans and handed out cookies to people who signed up to work that time for us. Honoring people and respecting them. If they know that you care and you really do and it's authentic and it's just not a show, it's amazing what they're willing to do on behalf of serving their clients. But it starts with what I said earlier, leadership is about serving other people. It's not about being served.
You got another question?
Yes, Will Hooker, DSU alumnus. Listening to the conversation, it seemed like early in your career, even when you joined Charles Schwab, you focused on retirement plans. So I couldn't leave without asking you, you hear a lot about underfunded pension plans with state employees and things like that. I want to get your opinion. Is that challenges that we're still, in your opinion, are we still having? And what do you see the challenges of facing pension plans and their recipients? And how does that correlate a difference, if there is a difference, in the way that Charles Schwab philosophy handles their pensions?
It's a really good question, and I think the retirement system in the United States is broken right now. And if I could just maybe share a quick story about that. When I started in the business, most people were under defined benefit pension plans, which meant that you go to work for a company, they make a promise that at retirement, we'll be in a position to pay you X amount a month, and you'll get paid that as long as you live. And the company took that responsibility. And then, probably about 8 or 10 years into my career, everything changed more to the 401k type of model, where you save on your own and make investment decisions and hope that it builds up enough for retirement. Here's the problem, and I've given many speeches on this, and I'll share some details on it. I mean, look, when companies had this responsibility to put aside enough money and invest it wisely enough to meet the promises that they made to employees, because if they didn't put away enough and save enough, what do they have to do? They had to put even more into the plan, right, to meet the promises. When they had that responsibility, they surrounded themselves with consultants and advisors and actuaries, like what I did, and paid us huge amounts of money to make sure that they made good decisions. Well, what happened when the industry transferred all this responsibility to individual employees? We gave them like an hour education meeting with some broker from down the street or something, or we gave them a slide rule, you know, or nowadays we give them a website. I mean, it makes no sense. It's really a broken model. I'll share a personal angle of it. So 2009, I was invited to New York City for this big to-do plan sponsor magazine, and they gave me, this must be an age now based thing, but they gave me this award that was for lifetime contributions to the retirement security of Americans. You're getting old when they start giving you those lifetime award type things. But what I remember as vividly as if it happened this morning is I was riding in the cab back to my hotel, and I was looking down at this really impressive crystal trophy and my name on it, you know, contributions to the retirement security of working Americans. And I looked at it and I called bull on myself. I said, that's not correct. That's not what I have done, because I have been part of that same industry that converted all these pension plans to 401ks and did this lousy job of providing the tools that employees really need to save and get to fair retirement. The next morning, I had a conference call of my staff that runs the retirement group, and I said, from this day forward, we're going to do it completely differently. Here's what we're going to do. Rather than doing some hour-long education meeting, and by the way, early in my career, I did 1,000 of these if I did one of them. And at the end of every one of those meetings, after I presented these choices and options and all this, this line of employees lined up, and they came up to me afterwards, and they said, well, that was really great, thanks for doing all this. I know you're not supposed to tell me, but what should I do? And I said, what we're going to do from now on at Schwab is our retirement program is going to, I don't want to get overly technical, but we're going to use only index investment vehicles underlying to keep the cost really low. And then we're going to offer customized, personalized advice for every single employee. Most retirement plans today use a target date fund, and target date funds are really simplistic, right? They take your age, and based on your age, they say, use this fund. But that makes no sense. What if you've got two people that are 40, one of them's got $1 million, the other one has 0, one has 6 kids, the other one has none. What do we tell them to do in a target date fund? Invest in the exact same thing? It makes no sense. So we went to where we do all just customized advice for every employee. It's making some progress. I won't say it's caught on as fast as I thought it would. Sometimes these things take time. But you know what? We're doing the right thing. And in time, back to our early comments on strategy, if you do the right thing, I think we'll win. And we'll eventually take a lot of market share.
Thank you. Any other questions? Keith? Yeah.
Looking like for Red.
Walt, this is Robert Panel.
Hey, Rob.
And
Man, you got to give me a lot of strokes.
You don't even know what I do, but I'm a State Farm insurance agent. And a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, I hear on our end too. But I want to ask you another thing that we hear. At our age, I built my business with people with relationships, you know. I mean, that's just what I did. Now, the younger agents, they use the term self-sufficiency. These people that are internet grew up, they don't want me telling them what to do. They can find out on their own. Do y'all have any of those same type issues in your business?
Robert, we absolutely do. In fact, you know, in our business, the great buzzword now is robo-advice, right? Which is a fancy, glorified, some marketing person thought up term for someone being able to go online and based on their risk profile, get an investment recommendation. And then technology will automatically rebalance it and tax loss harvest it and things like that. And we actually were one of the first firms to come out with that. You know, I think what you identified, Robert, is a huge issue. And there's a lot of people in our business who worry that the future will not involve people. And maybe it's my age, maybe it's the years in business, maybe it's things like my Dottie experience. I just don't buy it. I don't buy it. Do I believe that there's a percentage of the population that is totally self-sufficient? Yes, and at Charles Schwab we have millions of investors who are completely self-directed and do it all on their own. But I think increasingly as people's lives get more complicated, maybe their affluence grows, they have family, they have children, they start to make prioritization decisions. And as they make those decisions, they realize that the time inherent in being self-sufficient, as you referenced, Robert, takes time away from being at that soccer game, or being a better spouse, or volunteering with their church or other area that's important to them. And so over time, people tend to gravitate toward wanting that trust-based relationship that you've obviously been able to successfully deliver in building your business. So I tend to think of it as more part of the evolution of a person's life rather than some fundamental shift that, you know, the people who are millennials today are, when they're, you know, my age, aren't going to want the kind of great relationship you've been able to build and deliver. Human nature is human nature, and I don't see that. I don't see it dramatically changing.
As we get close to the end, let me ask you a question. Someone in your position, with your background, your character, what can you do in being proactive in trying to help the situation we find ourselves in this country politically? That's an open-ended question, but you recognize the problems we see with what's happening with the Federal Reserve in the sense of with the low interest rates. We at some level we like low interest rates, but yet we recognize the situation as it evolves and as we go forward. But yet we need people like you that have influence that may be able to make some impact with what goes on in Congress. I'm just curious as to what you think about that situation and how you might act or react, and how we, in this part of the country, what we can do, if anything.
Boy, is that tough. You know, I wouldn't necessarily say that I have any more influence than anybody else in this room. I spend time in Washington, of course. I meet with many of the leaders. I'm not going to use that term. I meet with many of the people in Washington in power. I'm not going to use the term leaders. It's a difficult situation. I don't know that I have the answer other than trying to do what we believe is right, maybe a whole lot of prayer. It's a tough situation. It's a very difficult situation. And unfortunately, we're at a place where the polarization is just at a level of intensity that is almost hard to describe, right? I mean, you're not extreme enough to this way, or you're not extreme enough to that way, and anybody that tries to, you know, even remotely find their way down the middle, you know, you get vilified or removed from your position or whatever it happens to be. It's really difficult. I think ultimately what I remind myself is, again, the goodness of human nature and of people, and that at some point in time, I believe we will get real leadership in Washington. I don't know who it will be. I don't even know what party it's going to come from. But I just have to believe in my optimistic side that we will get real leadership in Washington, people that I'd be honored to call leaders and follow, and that they will bring our country together and deal with some of the real challenges that we need to be dealing with.
Being CEO and not knowing how long that's going to last, but how would you like to be?
I never know.
How would you like to be remembered years to come?
Yeah, I mean, clearly the most important thing in terms of how I'm remembered is, you know, as a faithful husband and a loving son, gentle father, loyal friend. I mean, that's what really matters. But I think from a business standpoint, just to have done my part during my time to try to make sure that Charles Schwab is different, and that we don't have to follow the path either in terms of a business model or from a leadership standpoint that so many other firms have followed. I think if we can do that, if we can be different, if we can be a challenger, if we can do the right thing, if we can build a business model that's not based on trying to convince consumers to do things that are bad for them, that'd be pretty fantastic. And I would feel entirely fulfilled from a business standpoint.
Thank you, Walt.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
We've got a question.
Okay.
Well, you'll see a lot of people around this room that have gray hair. One of the interesting things that you read about in the paper nowadays, it says more than half of people that start drawing Social Security draw before their full retirement age, and the reason being is they really don't have any confidence in the future of Social Security. I'm sure your associates are very involved with Social Security planning. I'd love to know your ideas on that and for the audience.
Again, it's a really tough issue. I'll never be in a position to influence it, so it's probably easier for me to say a few things. But we probably need to means test it somehow. I mean, it doesn't make sense for Chuck to be collecting Social Security. It's not going to make sense for me to collect Social Security. We probably need something to means test it. I know the left side doesn't like that because then they're worried that it appears like it's an entitlement program. But probably some kind of means testing, things like that. From what I've seen and the people I've met with in Washington, the Social Security issue is fairly solvable. The health care issue, that's a whole nother story. That one could be much more difficult. But we could solve the Social Security one with a continuing probably indexing of the retirement age as longevity continues to grow among the population, and by maybe doing some means testing and ensuring that those who really are in need of Social Security are able to continue to receive it, and those who are fortunate enough to maybe not need it, maybe don't. Pretty simple, straightforward. Boy, you think we could do some of these things, huh?
Any other questions?
Keith, all that.
Yep.
Walt, Mark Graham, and thank you so much for coming back. It means a lot to all of us. Thank you for all the happy language. We like that. We think that's great. But let's break Walt down a little bit. What's your favorite sports teams? What do you like to do on your day off? Let's hear about Walt at this point, and Terry.
Yeah. I said, as somebody told me earlier, you're going to be here today, Mark. I said, Mark was a whole lot better baseball player than I ever was.
Thank you.
Didn't you hit a home run your first game or first at bat or something as a freshman?
That's not about me today, Walt.
But no, seriously.
First at bat.
First at bat. I knew it was something like a 3-run homer or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, we're off. Anyway, yes, it was.
And he was a left-handed hitter, so he hit it probably over the fence on, was that number 9 at the university course back then? I knew that fence really well because I used to slice a bunch out of bounds over there. So he hit it over the fence on purpose. I hit it over the fence by accident. But
I'll buy you lunch.
I'm a big Orioles fan. I've been fortunate to be able to develop some friendships with some amazing people like Cal Ripken. My family lived in Baltimore the summer of '66. I was 5 years old. Orioles won the World Series that year. I think probably somebody said to me, "Walt, who's your favorite baseball team?" And I went, "The Orioles." But I'm a huge Orioles fan. I'm very fortunate over the years to be a Cavs fan. Sit when we lived in Ohio, courtside there, and I'm a long-suffering Browns fan. Boy, is that tough. That's tough to be a Browns fan. To me, I think after many of the mistakes early in my life in terms of being a workaholic, things like that, I just recognized that being a husband, being a father, being home was what matters. That's what the priorities were. And so, all my free time, basically, this is why I was never good at golf, but now I'm just awful at golf. All my time, if I'm not at work, is with Terry and our children. I was very fortunate. Our older daughter was a wonderful sprinter, a two-time All-American in the 100-meter dash in college, and we made all of her track meets. Our son was a 4-year starter on scholarship in college in basketball, and an all-state player, and led nation three-point shooting. I think on 140 basketball games in 4 years of college, and I missed 3 of them. But again, you set your priorities, right? And that's a whole lot more important to me than whether I carry a 10 handicap now. That's what we've tried to do together, is be there for our little ones. Last night on the flight to Greenville, we were getting a play-by-play while our 2 younger daughters were in a tooth-and-nail volleyball game on every single point by friends that were at the game. But yeah, it's family's what matters, right? I mean, when all else is said and done, what matters, right? What matters.
Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
With that, we will conclude, and Walt, again, thank you for being here for Delta State, and we're glad to have you back, and very much so. Thanks for being here.
Don't go anywhere. We still have presentation.
Right. Well, we're the Business Student Advisory Committee, and we would like to present you from some gifts. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us today.
Thank you so much. I got to tell you, I was looking online for a green Delta State tie to wear today.
Would you please bring out the tie?
They weren't.
Please bring the tie.
They weren't on sale. I couldn't wear one.
And the bow tie. We took care of that. Please bring the tie and the bow tie. Let's bring out the golf team first. Golf team, Sam, golf team members, any golf team members, come make your presentation to Walt. Terry, why don't you come up here for these photos? You want to see?
This is the first time I never got any award for headlining golf before.
Sam Dottie.
Well, thank you for being here. Congratulations on your career. And I know Darryl Foreman would really be proud of you. And I don't know if you know it, but you really helped our recruiting. I told you to come to Delta State. After you get through, you make $10 million. Just listening to you, I'm not sure Darryl ever gave you a bag. So I've got one here. All the golf team is here with us, and every one of them are from Mississippi also.
Wonderful.
So thank you very much on everything you've done.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Good luck. Congratulations.
This is on behalf of Coach Jim Boone, since you are such a Delta State fan and a basketball fanatic.
That's my son. That's awesome.
How did Delta State know that was your son's number? Would you please slip it on? This is on behalf of the National Alumni Association, Jeffrey Ferris, our Director of Alumni Affairs.
Thank you, Walt, and thank you, Keith. And on behalf of 30,000+ who live in alumni at Delta State, first off, the definition of alumnus, Walt, is anyone who has attended one full semester at Delta State University. So we're proud to have you and Terry on our campus as a Delta State alum, but want you to know that you've always been a Delta State alum. As I try to do the math, I see that you have children that will be looking for grad school, and also children within 5 to 8 years who will be looking for a home for a university. So I want to be also the first one to offer your children a scholarship for children of alumni, the Hugh Ellis Walker Alumni Scholarship. They're for children of our alumni. Thank you for being here today and speaking to our students. And on behalf of the National Alumni Association, we'd like to present you a Distinguished Service Award.
Thank you. That's so kind.
Dr. McAdams, if you'll make the presentation on behalf of President Forge, had another meeting, he had to slip out. Dr. McAdams, if you'll make this presentation.
Walt, it's really been an honor to have you here today. I think everyone has been so touched as well as impressed with your words. And I'm pleased to provide you with this key to Delta State University. Thank you very much.